but certainly the power of great literature to affect and impact lives is if you like, it's epitomized by my own journey. I was a white supremacist. I hated Christianity. I particularly hated Catholicism. I was actually a member of an anti-Catholic secret society called the Orange Order. And it was through reading, first of all, the works of Chesterton, and then Belloc, and then discovering C.S. Lewis, and eventually discovering St. John Henry Newman and St. Thomas Aquinas, that I came to the journey to Rome, to the church. So I can certainly speak on a personal level of the power of great literature and great minds and great thinkers and great writers to bring people from very bad places to the light of Christ. And of course, when my research in Chesterton, for instance, there's so many other people, and Lewis and others, it carries on, Newman, that have brought many people to the Catholic faith through their writings. And so this is the power of great literature, and this is the power that I'm trying to tap into in my own work.
I'm going to be honest with you. When I think of a white nationalist skinhead, I don't think of people who read. I know I don't mean to be judgmental, but it's a stereotype, I would argue. But nonetheless, clearly you did. What, were you a reader before? Did you had time on your hands because you were doing time that you just decided you were entertaining yourself? Like, I wonder how many people in the world actually read today. I mean, we're reading our phones, we're reading social media, we're reading summaries of articles, bullet points of articles, not articles themselves. In fact, Twitter warns me every time I share something, and they want to know whether I've read it first or not. So do people read? Did you read? And I mean, I don't know that people are reading, let alone enjoying the power of these great literature.
They're great questions. First of all, I thank God that I have always been a bibliophile, and I think that saved me. You are correct that many of my comrades in the white supremacist movement were not readers, and they were therefore unable to escape as easily, or as well, I should say. I don't know how easy it was, but as well as I was, because of my ability to read books and to find the doors to all of this wisdom, this whole vista of Western philosophy, Western theology, the beauty of great storytelling, great poetry open to me. It's like walking into a glorious cathedral and walking in the presence of a great sunrise. You're edified, you're lifted up, and a definition of prayer is lifting up the mind and the heart to God. Well, the experience of beauty does that, as well as the experience of truth. So goodness, truth, and beauty leads us to the good, the true, beautiful himself, who is Jesus Christ. But your other question, I think, is very, very important. In our techno-addicted times, when most of us are to one degree or another suffering from addiction to our gadgets, I sometimes call our gadgets our godgets, because we spend more time with our gadgets than we do with our God. And that's a problem. We need space and time in order to pray. We need space and time in order to read. And if we don't make that space and time for ourselves, then we're going to be distracting ourselves to death, literally, spiritual death, because we will be so agitated by all of the nonsense and all of this soundbite stuff out there. It hits you at impact with no real substance, just for something that's going to get a reaction. We'll be agitating ourselves to death. We will lose the sense of serenity, and more to the point, we'll lose sight of the finishing line. All of us are going to die. It could be tomorrow for all of us. We need to keep our eyes on the finishing line, and being distracted by things of this world, and particularly by techno addiction, is a distraction we need to be very, very aware of, and to beware of it.
What was the first thing that you read that moved your heart towards considering the Catholic Church, something you, as you said, you were vehemently opposed to? What was the first thing that you were like, oh man?
Well, basically, nobody would have got me to read a Christian book, and nobody would have got me to read a Catholic book under any circumstances. So what got me, and say, one way or the other, the God finds a way of getting to us. I was interested in politics, obviously, and economics, and I was opposed to communism, but I was also opposed to what we would now call globalism. And so I thought it can't be a simple choice between sort of global capitalism on the one hand and global communism on the other. There has to be some other way of seeing things. So I was looking for other solutions, other ways of thinking outside the box, the ideological box, so to speak. And someone said, if you looked at the economic and political ideas of GK Chesterton, well, who's he, right? So I bought a book called a book was called The Well and the Shallows. For one essay, this person, you have to read this essay. You really have to read this essay. So I bought the book, and I thought, well, if this man's chest is worth reading, I'll start reading from page 1. And the book was called The Well and the Shallows, and the well is the Catholic Church, and the shallows is everything else. And the book basically is a defense of the Catholic Church. And I find myself reading it, and I'm gobsmacked. I'm astonished because, I was always brought up to believe you have to choose between faith or reason. You've got to do one or the other. You can believe in Christianity, believe in God, and have the comforts of religion, but you have to abandon reason in order to do so. Or you can be rational, which means you have to abandon the comforts of religion and live in the nasty world as it is. And then I read Chesterton, who of course led me to the realization that faith and reason are indissolubly united. They're married in an indissoluble wedding. The fides et ratio cannot be separated. And so this was of course, Aristotle and Thomas Aquinas. I didn't know that. Chesterton is a great exponent of these great ideas. And I found myself falling in love with Chesterton as a man, as a person, his sense of humor, his ideas. I didn't agree with his Christianity at first. So let me actually parallel very quickly. The first book of C.S. Lewis I read was his book Surprised by Joy. And in that, he discusses when he first read Chesterton, when he was a soldier in World War I, and he was an atheist, and an anti-Catholic atheist because he was from Northern Ireland. And he said you would have thought that Chesterton would be the least conducive of writers for someone like me. He said, but I couldn't help liking Chesterton. It's almost like falling in love. It's almost against your will. And I liked his sense of humor. I liked his way of thinking. And Chesterton had more common sense than all the moderns, except, of course, his Christianity. And that was my position. Yes, I read Lewis said, Lewis, you're completely right about this, except, of course, Christianity. Then I realized, of course, Lewis also became a Christian. Bit by bit, I found myself drawn to Catholicism against my will because all the people I liked who spoke the most common sense were Christians and mostly Catholics.
I guess it was easy to read Lewis for you then because you're like, okay, he's not a Catholic, he's an anti-Catholic, he was an atheist, so that must have been easier for you to read Lewis.
Well, when I first picked up that book, Surprised by Joy, I had no idea Lewis was even a Christian. I read this bit, he's an atheist, so I'm going to buy this book. And of course, Surprised by Joy is Lewis's conversion story. So then I'm now being drawn into Lewis's process of moving from being an atheist to being an Anglican Christian believer. So it's almost as if, and Lewis says in that book actually, says a sound atheist cannot be too careful of his reading. So the point is, I'm picking up all these books, and it's leading me into dangerous territory, into perilous realms, ultimately to the gates of Holy Mother Church.
I loved listening to you talk about how this literature impacted your life when you're in prison for being a National Socialist Nazi, essentially. Would you consider yourself a Nazi? I guess I need to ask that to be clear. Did you consider yourself a Nazi? And then if so, I imagine you were steeped in Marxist literature.
Well, I was a neo-Nazi, so yeah, a new generation of Nazis. When I first joined the movement, I was only 15 years old. So the first couple of years when I was very impressionable, I certainly was sort of an admirer of Adolf Hitler and all of that nonsense. But I was on a journey away from that and looking for something different, because I realized that there's a lot of stuff about that which is very unhealthy. Even I, as an angry young man, realized that there was a lot of bad stuff there. And I thought, I don't want to go the whole hog with this. I want to keep some of the good stuff, but get rid of some of it. So I was looking on a journey away from it.
You were always thinking then.
Yeah,
you were always thinking.
I think that I've always had a desire to know the truth, and I think the quest for truth has been something that's animated me throughout my life from as far back as I can remember. That's why I got involved in politics, because I had a vision of the truth, which was, I was young, naive, and stupid. So the vision of the truth was warped and wrong. but but I was nonetheless pursuing what I thought was right, and thankfully, continue to do that, and so therefore, if I saw things that were wrong in my beliefs, I wanted to look for, well, hold on, I don't have to accept that because I accept this, right? So it's an ongoing journey, and so really reading Chesterton and these other Catholic writers was part of that ongoing journey that led me out of the darkness. Now, sometimes see analogies with the beginning of the Divine Comedy by Dante, where he finds himself in the dark wood of sin, and he can't escape because of his own addiction to sin, but he's led away through grace. And that's the two things about it. I was absolutely convinced that my conversion was completely rational. It was a path of reason through reading from Chesterton to Aquinas, Aristotle, etc., and understand this connection between faith and reason. But later, looking back, I realized that another thing was happening that I was unaware of at the time, and that was healing. So the supernatural grace being poured into me, healing me of a lot of the anger and hatred, which was not rational, and some of it's not rooted in reason and cannot necessarily be rooted out by reason. There's a healing that has to happen as well. And so both were happening. So this grace, and that's, of course, absolutely the way we understand it as Orthodox Catholics, is that we cannot follow Christ merely through the power of our own will. We also need supernatural assistance. And I thought that I was following him, arriving at the doors of the church through my own will, my engagement with reason. And I was certainly cooperating. But what I was cooperating with was the supernatural grace that's being poured into me, allowing me, first of all, to have the desire, the appetite, but also this healing, as I said, this purging of some of the really bad stuff that needed to come out of me so that I could move forward away from the bigotry and the hatred and the racism.
Yeah, we only have 6 or 7 more minutes with Joseph Pearce here. There's I think hours. I want to dive into even your relationship with your dad and how he read and what was he reading. That would fascinate me. But I do want to get just a really quick sense from you. You must have been reading Karl Marx. What was your take of Karl Marx in his writing?
Well, that what we say about the Nazis and the communists is they hate each other, but they have a great deal in common. So obviously Marxism led to international socialism, otherwise known as communism. Marx wrote with Friedrich Engels the Communist Manifesto, and the Nazis were national socialists. So they shared the socialism. They both rooted in the philosophy and politics of the Enlightenment. But the Nazis, because of their racism and their anti-Semitism, were very opposed to communism, which they saw as being largely Jewish, and therefore in itself to be dismissed for that. But also the globalist aspect of communism, this international rejection of all nations, was something that the Nazis did not agree with. Because the Nazis, they were German bigots basically, and I was an English bigot, so I became an English version of the Nazis until as I said, I outgrew that by the grace of God and the use of reason.
Amen.